All right, so we are live. Yay, super excited. This is the Upper Left Show. This is our first time going at this. It's essentially a live stream that we're doing out of Pacific Northwest. So I'm up in Western Washington. Cassandra is in Oregon and covers into South Washington. And the whole point of this is we're going to be looking at not only our area, but other areas in the real estate world as well. If you're on here, you know, kind of how I am, like, please feel free to drop comments on whatever platform you're on or just say hi. And we'll make sure that we get to those questions. Obviously, this will be a growing thing. So, you know, we'll take what we can get for this first go around for sure, which is awesome. So, Cassie, a lot of people are on here, you know, that follow me. So kind of give us a little intro to you since you're going to be kind of on here with me. What's that look like? Who are you? Where are you from?
Hey. Well, my name is Cassandra Marks. I am, like Austin said, a realtor in Portland and Southwest Washington. Honestly, I started as an investor back in 2011. I bought my first house back in Minnesota, Midwest. I lived there for about 4 years, did some work on it, and then it was time to go to the next house. I've been buying and selling and renovating houses since 2011. Finally got to a point where my husband was like, I'm tired of telling people and having other realtors help us and lose our profit margin. So, can you get your license? And at that point I was kind of fed up with corporate America. So, it was time. It was a good time. Other than that, I live on a farm, a small hobby farm in Southwest Washington, kind of like what I grew up on in Minnesota, and I've got chickens, dogs, cats, geese, and a huge garden. And so I like to say that I am a farmer with a real estate problem.
So you said you got that first house. Now, was it investment in 2011 or was that a personal home?
That was my first home, personal home. But back then, we all know, when you're in your early 20s, you're like, oh no, I can barely afford this because you've got college bills and all that other debt. You decide to buy a car right after college too. So when I bought the house, I could afford it, but what I did was had two of my friends move in and pay rent, and that was the way to make it work back then. Bought the house. It's a 3-bed, 2.5 bath townhome, and paid $135 for it. And 4 years later, sold it for about $225.
Right. So what was your, if you don't mind me asking, what was your monthly mortgage on that first property? Do you remember?
Oh gosh. A lot. No, I think it was like $1,100. And then I had an HOA since it was a townhome. So, two friends paying about $900 total, and then I paid the rest in the HOA. It was pretty great.
Yeah, so you end up being the one. So they're paying 100% interest basically on your house. You're paying a small payment, and ended up having your own property. And that's something I like. I've pushed a lot of my younger clients is like, hey, you've got all these buddies that are renting. Like, this is exactly what you should do. So it's funny that without even really having that knowledge back then, that you were already doing that. I mean, did somebody recommend that to you? Did that just kind of come naturally?
Honestly, I bought it and my boyfriend was with me, and then a couple of months later I kicked him out. So I had to find a way to help pay for the house, honestly.
That's good. Yeah, house hacking is insanely powerful, especially for, it's a great way to invest when you're young. And I wish we could see more people take advantage of it, especially with the area where you live and where I live. Costs are so insanely high that it seems like it's almost damn near impossible unless you're making well into the six figures to even buy a house.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, Austin, because I actually have some friends that are trying to buy a house right now, and the only way that they can afford is to go in with another couple.
That's interesting. And we talked about this a little bit, off camera earlier, but it seems like people are going out and they're getting jobs and they're getting established in careers, and they're not even able to, buy a house like at all. Like, they're going to 4-year college. You get a friend that's going to be going to education, or maybe as an education, and they're not really in a position where they can even purchase a home when my like my mom's a teacher. Like we always had a house. So it seems like our markets are just pricing out the working class, if you can even say that exists anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just kind of, it just kind of stinks. And I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of agents I know in my market that are getting really frustrated because people are getting pre-approved. I'm Midwest boy also. I'm originally from Missouri, so average price point's like $8. And I get, we get a pre-qualification here for people that would be like a gold mine in Missouri. Like you literally be like, oh my God, I'm gonna be rich when I help these people buy a house because it's X whatever.
Yeah.
And up here right now, the way things are going, you get that same pre-approval here, and you're like, sorry, dude, like you're not buying anything at all. Like you're not getting anything.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, I got one the other day and it was like her pre-approval was like 225 and I was like, I don't even think I can maybe get you into a one-bed condo, like maybe. But they figure in the fact that they figure in like HOAs and stuff like that into your affordability is what makes it so hard. And the whole thing that's sad is like I've got friends that are paying like $2,800 a month for rent, but they can't buy a house.
Exactly. That's the frustrating thing for a lot of people is they don't understand that either, is that they can afford it when they pay the rent, but they can't technically afford it, with their like DTI and things along those lines. So I do have a video on YouTube about DTI. If you guys are not familiar with what that looks like, it's like 4 minutes long. You can watch it if you'd like. It's terrible, but it's on there. So feel free to check it out. So you're covering Oregon and Southern Washington both, right?
Yeah. So my in-laws live in Salem. So I go from Salem to Longview, Washington, pretty much. I originally lived in Portland, and so I know the Portland market very, very well when I was initially licensed. And then obviously I know Salem really well because there's a lot of family. And when you're first starting to get your license, you do your CMAs and everything. Obviously, I did it for all my family. So I learned Salem quite quickly. And then, we moved to Washington in September of 2019. I decided that I finally wanted my farm. I'd had enough city life for me and was like, okay, farm time. And well, why would I live in Washington without a real estate license in Washington? So
sure.
Being local is different for everybody.
Well, and that's just it. Like I have a lot of clientele that are still in Missouri, and they still reach out, they still want to buy, they still want to sell. And so being in different states, and Rebecca in my organization, obviously there's a lot of people in Florida still. So we're navigating between multiple states. And I think a lot of people are concerned if their agent isn't like in their neighborhood. And that's really kind of a thing I think of the past. You had to know the neighborhood now, but everything now is as a digital reach, right? As far as marketing and things like that. It doesn't really matter if you live a block away, right? So covering 2 states, like how are you helping your clients when you're, let's say, a state away, I guess?
I think the biggest thing is just being there for them and being accessible. And knowing what's going on in the local market. Like just because I don't live in Oregon doesn't mean I don't know what's going on with, kind of one of our other topics, rent control. I have to know what's going on there. I have to know which legislation and keep up with school policies and like what kind of bills they're trying to and levies they're trying to pass, because you want to be the most informed you can for your clients. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be right there, like you said. I know things like Multnomah County has the highest tax rate in the Tri-County area and also the highest water bills. So if you want a little less taxes and a little less on your water bill, move to Clackamas County.
So what are you seeing in your market? Like what are the market trends right now where you're at?
A mass exodus, honestly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the Portland locals are fleeing definitely the inner city. Anywhere downtown, in the Pearl District downtown, they're trying to get out. And it's, a lot of it has to do with what happened in not only the pandemic, but the riots. It just people didn't feel the downtown vibe anymore. With the restaurants closing and everything. Portland had an amazing food scene. It still does, but you got to run around to find it now. It's not just all downtown. But people are fleeing to the suburbs, yes, kind of like they did in the 90s where everyone, wanted that big house out in the suburbs. And what's funny about the whole Portland makeup, I don't know, I can't speak to Seattle as well, but the west side of Portland is like super suburby. And that's where you'll find Intel and Nike and a lot of the larger corporations. And a lot of people that work at those corporations live over there. And then you have the east side, which is very city-like, very small lots, very close together, all very older, like much older homes. And then you have like one suburb on the east side, which is Happy Valley. And that's where most of the Californians move. So I think the biggest thing with Portland is commutability too. Like Portland is the most affordable city on the West Coast.
Okay.
Still, like if you look at it, Seattle to San Francisco to LA to even down to San Diego. Portland's still the most affordable. You're looking at 610,000 average to get in. But I can't talk what's Tacoma area to get in. Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle, you're basically looking at 750 to 8 to walk in of a standard. And if you
Oh no, you just froze. And was that me or you? Oh no. Uh-oh.
looks like we kind of ran into some difficulties there with Cassie. Give me just a minute, guys, and we'll get her. There you are.
I was like, was it me or is it you?
Yes, that's you in your farm.
Probably. Oh, we have really bad internet connection.
That'll make fun for editing later. So Seattle, you're looking at about like 800. I think 750 to 800 is probably realistically reasonable. And there are areas that are cheaper. So before everyone in Seattle gets really upset with me, there are areas that are cheaper. Did just help a gentleman buy a 3-bedroom house right outside of Tacoma for $550, which has been pretty good, But again, if you're in Tacoma has its rough. I love Tacoma, first of all. It's like definitely my jam coming from Springfield, Missouri. But it can get rough just like Seattle can, and then the minute you creep out of there, you hit like Bonnie Lake, which is a small suburb town, about 20,000 people, and you're at 606. But if you go north of Seattle, I mean, you're a million plus all day, like everywhere all day. And I think the affordability of it is just miserable, which I guess kind of brings me into that discussion that I wanted to have about, rent control, because we don't actually have rent control here in Washington. Like, it's illegal in Washington. It's not supposed to happen. And we'll kind of get into what Seattle has done and kind of my thoughts on their wiggling their way around it. But I did see a new study that showed that 14% of all single family rentals in Portland have been sold off in the last few years, sorry. And really, tenant protection seems to be like what most people are blaming it on. Now, not having rent control here, right? What are some of the positives and some of the negatives that you guys see by actually having that in place?
So they're following a lot of what they did in San Francisco and what they've done in New York City, and what you've seen there is skyrocketing rents. The pros, there's some pros, there's some cons. I see both sides of the argument. Okay, so some pros are obviously predictable rent increases. You know how much your property is going to go up, and just so everybody knows, the Senate Bill 608 is what it's called in Oregon, and they allowed for a 7% increase plus the consumer price index, which depending upon which year it was, I think 2020, it was like 10.4% total is what you could raise your rent. If you raised it more than that and they couldn't afford it, you had to pay your tenants to leave, to relocate.
Yep.
And in the city of Portland, it's 3 bedrooms and it up to 3 bedrooms and it's $4,500. So, I mean, I have friends that are renters. I have friends and clients, obviously, that have purchased homes. And we've had very heated discussions about whether rent control was good or not. I think a few of them have changed their minds.
Yeah.
One of them was like, well, my rent will only go up a certain amount every year. I go, but now it's going to go up every year. And that's a lot of what we're seeing is everybody has to raise those rents because one con is that bill does not take into account or thought for property tax increases.
Yep.
And so you're seeing, you know, I hate to say it, but like some people's property taxes went up $2,000 or $3,000 this year because of how much appreciation and everything that's going on and all the new, you know, people were passing new levies and stuff for schools and whatnot. I mean, I was hearing inklings about tax bills being like, oh yeah, my property taxes were $9,000 and now they're almost 12 a year.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, so a lot of the times with rentals that, you know, they don't take that into account. And I've had clients, they've had rentals. This one client of mine had 4 rentals, single family rentals that he pulled out of the rental pool because of not only the rental laws, but also because of the way they screen tenants. And he said, I don't want to deal with it anymore. And he's like, sell them.
Yeah. And I think, you know, screening is something that's came up. I mean, the way that you screen or can't screen, the way that you, you know, justify incomes. And there's so many little things that kind of go into that, you know, like, you know, regulations around the way and the amount of like security deposits, timelines for processing applications, you know, and specifically what does some of those things look like when you're a, you know, I obviously want to take care of like the tenants, but what do those things look like from a investment property owner standpoint?
A lot of the times, obviously, as realtors, we're not always experts in everything. And I advise all of my clients to talk to a tenant landlord attorney immediately before they even think about buying a property like that, so that they can fully understand what the tenant landlord laws are in the state of Oregon. You know, and I advise them, even if they're buying in Washington, the same thing. I'm like, you need to talk to someone and you also need to get a property manager. If you've never done it, get a property manager. They are the experts, pay them. It is worth it. And so just like some of the other, like one thing that's a con about the whole, you know, Senate Bill 608 is it doesn't incentivize landlords to also to upgrade their units to
Right.
do anything, because they're basically saying, I'm sorry, you can only make this much money now. That's it. And we're going to raise your taxes this much, but you can only go up this much. And mom and pops, historically, what I've seen in a couple articles, and I was trying to find them before we talked today, but historically, the mom and pop renters, someone that has somewhere between 1 and 4 rental units, are typically leasing their properties below market rate, which makes it more stable, because people, once they get into a place and it's a lower rent, and if they're happy with it, they'll stay. And that's what they're trying to do with these like limiting the increases, is to try to stabilize the market. But when you have some people, like I have some friends that they get an increase every year and they're like, I can't afford this. I can't afford this. So they go somewhere else. And then like they constantly are spending all this money on moving and relocating because income isn't following them with the price of the rental. And so they're like, well, the affordability is going down. All right, another person needs to move in. And all of this, and I'm sure you know this, all of this stems back to 2008.
Right.
All of it.
Trying to hold off anything bad, right?
It's just the whole amount that we didn't build for like 4 years nationwide has caused this. And then the largest portion of the millennials turning 30 in 2020 just made this enormous gap in housing.
Yep.
And cost of building. It's really unfortunate. And you know, I get why they want to put this rental cap on, because they don't want people to be gouged out of their homes. But I think, personally, from what I've seen, I think people, they raise their rents every year now, where some wouldn't. and they would leave them. And the other little nix on that Senate Bill 608 is that if the complex is 15 years old or less, they are not subject to Senate Bill 608. They can raise their rents as much as they want every year.
If it's newer.
If it's 15 years old or newer, so like between 1 and 15 years old, the complex is, or the house is, they can raise their rents as much as they want.
So what stresses me out about that is, that right there, in my opinion, this is my opinion. I don't have any data to back this up. This is just a feeling I have, right? Is I feel like that is pandering to big business. That's pandering to the giant companies that come in and can afford to build giant apartment complex, when we know that the majority of our investment properties are owned by the mom and pops, like you said. And we know that typically, right, those mom and pop investors are ones that had owned a property, usually had lived in it for a large portion of their life, right? And then they moved on, and instead of selling, they rented it out because let's be honest, like they knew somebody, or they just wanted to make a few extra bucks. They don't really have that same giant corporate level structure. So a lot of those mom and pops aren't going to be having brand new builds as their main investment portfolio.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to answer Melanie's question, if that's all right with you. So they don't care if it's remodeled or not. It's just the age of the building. If the building is 15 years or older, it's subject to Senate Bill 608. If it's 15 years or newer, it's not.
So yeah, this question basically, does the bill include remodeled units over 15 years old? That's okay. That's all right. Just want to make sure we've got it for audio later. So yeah, that's really interesting. And I do really feel that's kind of playing around, those things. Now, I will tell you, like,
I kind of understand why they did it. I mean, I see both sides on it, because if you think about it, they're trying to encourage them to build. Right. So what's an encouragement? Well, you can make all this money for 15 years because you can raise the rent as much as you want. So they're like trying to encourage it, but it's also like the only people that would live in those buildings are the people that aren't really as much affected with income. And a lot of those people own homes.
Yep.
So where are we at?
Right. And a lot of times you can get, the city or the town to, push back taxes for you for a couple of years too, if you're doing a new build that's going to cause some, economic growth. So that does create a lot of incentive. I know, for here, we did have like a political party that tried to move some rent control laws like through the House last time, our legislature met. They failed pretty hard on it. It was, basically a side note. Politics, they're going to be kind of going back after it again. I think some of them said they were going to be looking towards shaping it a little bit more like how Portland has it with some of those, Oregon has it with some of the more of those little fine notes in there. But we did, and I don't know if you know this or not, so we actually had rent control essentially put in place in Seattle. Now, like, it's illegal in Washington. I've said that multiple times, but they basically kind of weaseled their way around the state law by using certain verbiage to get rent control put in place for the city of Seattle. And there were some things in there, and I think it's kind of similar to like what you were saying. So like in Washington, basically have the standard of like, hey, you got to give, 60-day notice before somebody moves out. I think that's pretty well like what Oregon's is too, right?
Yeah. Okay. It depends if you're under or over a year.
Gotcha. So now in Seattle, we actually have the highest notice in the country. So, if they want to raise rent, they have to give people 180 days notice, which I think is pretty wild. I mean, think about like the amount of appreciation, like let's say taxes come in and your tax bills increased by a ton, right? And then you have to wait 6 months before you can do anything about it.
Yeah.
Like, that seems absolutely wild.
Yeah. And Senate Bill 608 states that in the first year of tenancy, you cannot raise the rent. And then month to month, oh gosh, I don't want to say this wrong. Month to month, it'll go month to month after that. And then I believe you have to give a 90-day notice in order to raise the rent.
Gotcha.
So once you're at 366 days, you can raise the rent, but you have to give them a 90-day notice ahead of that. So after, 9 months, you say, I'm going to raise the rent.
Yeah. So yeah, it's still that's pretty steep still.
Yeah.
And then this other crazy thing, I don't know if yours is similar, but like we have this, or Seattle proper at least has a rule in place where now if someone is considered low income, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, so I don't know if it's exactly the same or not, but landlords now are required to pay like up to 3 months of rent to the tenant to assist them in moving. Which that just sounds insane to me.
It depends. So there's a whole slew of things, and we can share the link to the website, to the little document. There's a 13-page document put out by Portland.gov about what you can and can't do. And it's just so much to go over, but basically it says that you're screwed as a landlord.
Yeah. Well, like, I think I always lean with an empathetic ear. Like I have a heart for people. I love fellow humans. I am not at all like the approach of, landlords rule, tenants suck. Like we've been on the tenant side of the coin too, where one day just the homeowner walked in and said, "Hey, I'm selling the place. Get your crap and get out." Like
you still have to pay them in Oregon on that.
I've been in that position, so like it's not like I'm strictly one-sided on this whatsoever. But one of the things I really didn't like about Seattle's rule, and I don't know if Oregon's is the same, but the way that rule is set up is that if you're a certain portion below the poverty level, you're entitled to that money. Okay. In Washington, you get to self-certify your income. So if they say the level is 60 grand and you turn in $58,000 of income, that landlord is screwed. Like that's all there is to it. Like you can just turn in let's say you have child support and an income, you can turn just your child support, and now that landlord is sunk. Like there is no way around it. There's, I've seen people try to go to court for this thing in different areas, and they just lose. I mean, that's it. And I hate that that's the standard. I don't know what the better route would be, obviously, but is that something you guys have down there as well?
No, some of the rules and policies around it, what's going on, like they've added a couple different, after 608, they added 291 and 290, I believe it was. And they talked about the landlord's ability to reject an applicant based on income, low credit scores, history of eviction, and certain criminal convictions. And they have to now be actually like convictions. They can't just be like arrested for.
Gotcha.
So, like someone that was arrested for and charged with marijuana. Well, now that marijuana is legal in Oregon, they're like, well, you can't count that one. And like, they just keep like, there's just so many things. And the income itself, I was talking to a friend who's going through it right now. Basically, right now, the rental market in Portland is like the purchasing market, like first one wins.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I didn't fill the I missed one line on the application. And since I had to resubmit, it gave me an 8-hour delay. Like you get docked 8 hours, and it's like they process them first come, first serve, and whoever's finished completely first. And they're like, okay, you get the house. Like that's literally how people are winning houses. It has not, and I feel bad for landlords because it has nothing to do what's on the piece of paper. It's just that it's filled out and paid for
in there. Well, and also it sucks, from a renter standpoint, you go to, if I'm working with you as my agent and you're sending me a list of homes from the MLS, right, I know that's a 5 to 15 minute turnaround when those homes are updated. And I feel awful for renters because I feel like a lot of the sources that they really have to use, because everybody lists their rentals in the MLS, Fizbo.com, Zillow, all that stuff is so delayed that by the time they see it, it's probably already gone. And I've seen a few people really get their hopes up about stuff and then just continuously get kicked in the teeth because that property doesn't even exist anymore because it was listed yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just, and so what I've seen, with the Seattle thing is in the last 6 months, there've been 3,000 buildings or what equated to 10,000 rental units that are gone. And that's that's shocking, first of all, in a 6-month period. Like
Mhm.
10,000 units. I mean, it's a big city, but 10,000 people said, see you later. And it's over these protections for tenants. But if you look at like your basic supply and demand, do you feel like you're going to see, I mean, do you feel like you're going to see skyrocketing competition, rents? Like, does this end up hurting the tenant more than it ends up helping the tenant?
I think it does. I mean, I've got friends that live in San Francisco. I've got friends that live in New York, and they talk about how unaffordable it is, and that how everybody who's been there a long time has stated it's come from rent control. And obviously, rental laws are different between states, but I think our job is to just make and help it be affordable. But there's just I don't know what to do. I just with the amount of restrictions, you're obviously seeing this crunch of like you said, people selling their places. I mean, I had a guy who sold four. Every other agent in my office, we talked about it when that rental law came in, and everyone's like, "Yep, they're selling, they're selling, they're selling." Agents that I know that had rentals, they sold all theirs too, and they're like, "I'm moving out of state because it's just too much." The profitability is not there, and if you think of it from the long run, it's it's a balance. It's a balance between the tenant and the landlord. Like a lot of the mom and pop 1 to 4 people, they don't want to gouge people. They want good renters. And
Yeah.
to get a good renter, you give a good rate. But when your cities and your counties and your jurisdictions are raising the rate, raising the taxes and everything else that goes with it, it's really hard for them to do that. And then also it makes it really hard to get a bad renter out. You
Yes.
got someone
Yes.
destroying a property that you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in, and the rules, state that they need to have 3 of the same, like, bad notices. It can't be just 3. It's 3 of the same. So like they could do 15 things wrong, but they still don't have 3 of the same, 3 strikes on the same row. So they're just staying there.
Well, and you did like a point. So I think for as far as investing goes, affordability. I mean, I've seen 3-bedroom, 2 baths in very, very landlord friendly states like South Carolina for 130 to 150. I've seen, properties in Missouri for, 140 grand. And these things are renting for like 1%. So if you're buying it for 130, it's renting for 1,300. Whereas in my personal neighborhood, their house is selling for, 800 to well over $1 million, and they're renting for 3 grand. Like, even with all of the other elements involved, right?
Mhm.
The return just doesn't even seem worth it from a landlord point of view. I don't know. It just seems, it's very perplexing to me. All these things come into place, and I think it's all very, very short-sighted in what they're doing. And I think people don't really understand the real estate market jumping in to be humanitarians. And I think they're just unfortunately missing the mark with the rent aspect of it. I will tell you guys, like, I don't know if you're watching this now, or whether you're watching YouTube or podcast later, like, there are great programs out there. So if you're in a rental position and you have a real estate agent, if you don't, holler at me. Emails on here, realaustinrobertson@gmail.com. I'll hook you up with somebody, whether you're in my market or not. There are programs like Home Partners. So we've been doing a lot of transactions with Home Partners lately. I don't know if you ever worked with them or not, Cass, but basically, if you qualify, they'll go out and buy a house for you, and then you can rent it back from them. So I think hopefully we'll start seeing some more programs like that maybe come to the forefront that make, the bleeding stop a little bit. I know we've helped multiple families by using that program when they just couldn't find anything at all, frankly.
Yeah, I've seen programs like that. I've also seen, so there's one program that right back before the pandemic it came out. It was called the Oregon Bond, and you had to qualify, you had to sign up, and you had to qualify for it. And if you qualified for it, they're like, we will give you X amount of dollars for your down payment. But the caveat was you had 3 months to get under contract, and with the limited amount of inventory, it was very difficult to get anyone under contract because it had to be in specific areas, and it had to be in, specific price points. And so it was just really difficult. There wasn't much nudge room. I know there was a couple agents at my old office that had clients that signed up for it, and I think only one actually got into a home, which because it was another rat race, just another more loopholes. But it was great for the one person that got in, but again, with the limited amount of inventory, I don't know. Can I just throw inventory at you really quick? Because I was like
Sure.
shocked by how bad our inventory was. I didn't realize
Yeah.
exactly how bad it was. So in March of this month, our total active listings, Portland Metro, was 2,709. And it was down from, and that's down from 2021 and also down from 2020 and a kick in the pants from 2019. In 2019 in March, we had almost 6,300 units on the market in March.
That's wild.
So, can you imagine not only that, but with the huge increase in prices? I mean, average home price went from 447 to 610 in 2 years. Like how that just really hurts everyone, and all these programs to help people get into homes, whether it's a VA loan or, FHA 3.5% down. People are just sitting here staring and going, well, I want the one that's going to close for sure. And it's going to be the cash or the 20 or the 30% down, the people that have all this money from other places. And it's just, my job as a realtor is to help people achieve the homeownership dream. And that's been really difficult.
So while we're on inventory, let's talk Portland area a little bit. So one of the things that I found very interesting as I was kind of researching up on this was looking at market statistics myself. And one of the craziest things that seemed insane was that a huge portion of the buyers for the Portland area are coming from out of state.
Correct.
And I really seem to feel like everyone's like going away, but I'm wrong. I was wrong. A lot of people are coming in from different states. What about
it's about net even?
Okay. So what about Portland is pulling people in? Like, let's be honest, like it doesn't seem that affordable. Politics don't favor a lot of people. At least according to the news, the homeless problem is pretty wild. So give us some insights. Like, what is pulling people into Portland right now?
So like we discussed a little bit, it is still the most affordable city on the West Coast, large city on the West Coast. And with everything that's been going on and people have been working remotely more, they're like, hey, like, let's move to Portland. It's more affordable. So back in 2019, I held an open house, and this is a 4-bed, 3-bath, probably like 3,500 square feet, like old, beautiful bungalow in, like this really nice neighborhood in Northeast Portland. And we had it up for 800,000. And I was sitting here watching people come into it like 2 out of 3 were from California, and they didn't see a flyer. They just saw open house and they came, and they walked in and they're like, how much is this house? And I'm like, 800,000. They're like, wait, what? Yeah. And they had like a double take, and they're like, huh? They're like, I'll take 3.
Okay.
So they're like, I'm going to sell my tiny little house that's like a third of this for $2 million. And I'm going to come up here and buy, 2 or 3 houses.
Yep.
And a lot of people were leaving Silicon Valley. That's where we've seen a lot. LA County. There's a website called howmoneymoves.com, and you can follow by county throughout the entire country and see where the money in your county is coming from and where it's moving to. So a lot of people were moving from, California and LA, like San Jose County and LA counties up into Portland. And then a lot of Portland, you will see either moving to out of Multnomah County, maybe into Clackamas or Washington counties, or moving to Spokane.
That's a jump.
It's just kind of how everything's evolved. Like Portland has grown before, like probably 10 years ago, grew so much. It was to a point where, 240 people were moving to Portland every day, and it wasn't sustainable. Well, now it's pretty much net even. Like people got tired of what was going on. People got tired of the city life and of it being, the traffic's horrible here, by the way. Anytime you get a city with 2 large rivers and lots of bridges, traffic is awful.
Yeah, I feel you there.
I'm from Minnesota, lots of rivers, horrible traffic.
I was just in Houston like 2 weeks ago, and I was just driving, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is epic!" Like people are honking each other, pissed off, and I'm like, "I'm moving nonstop. This is the
Yeah.
greatest thing ever," you know. So I know, yeah, traffic is rough. So I guess with that coming into play, like, and a lot of what I do is relocation. If you got people moving in from out of state, what's the job market like in your area? I know like our unemployment nationally is, at about 3.6%. Portland area is at 3.8. So just a little bit, slightly over, but not enough to make any real difference. But if somebody's moving kind of into your area, like what are the hot employers? Who should they be looking to? Who are they reaching out to? Where are they going?
So I'd say of some of the top ones, the number one company in the Portland metro area is Intel.
Okay.
They're all over on the west side, and they've got a bunch of campuses over there. Same thing with Nike. Nike's over on the west side as well too. So a lot of Hillsboro and Beaverton and Aloha. There's a lot of new build going on over there, and a lot of those are going to new employees for those companies. Surprisingly, US Bank was like number 3 or number 4. I didn't think that was as big as it should be, but it is. Them and Wells Fargo. There's actually a lot of banking here in Portland. And then Adidas, Columbia, a lot of other, apparel, outdoor companies. Boeing, and then one up and comer that's actually really huge. I had a client move from Texas, relocated to Portland to work for this company. They're called Zoom Info. They're actually out of Vancouver, Washington, and
Okay.
they are a data, 100% data. They do a lot of for a bunch of different companies, whether it's I think Salesforce or tons of other different companies, but they're hiring like crazy right now, and they're doing great things.
You said Zoom Info?
Zoom Info.
Okay. Interesting. So, looking at like I saw this really cool study or whatever. It said that home buyers, need about 34% more money as far as income than they did a year ago to buy a house. So, this conversation was coming up. I looked into the same statistics for Portland, and it looks like in order to buy a home compared to a year ago, you'd need about 40% more income to buy a house. Now, with that said, we also have interest rates that have creeped from 3 to 5%. So, just a purely opinion based question. Do you still think now's a good time to buy a house in that area?
Well, people are going to hate me for saying this. I always think it's a great time to buy a house because you're investing in yourself and you're investing in your future. It is, I know historically interest rates have been higher in the 80s. They were like 18.2%, like 82 when my mom bought a house.
Right.
But
The house
okay,
was $12
I
also.
guess how I look at it is do you want to pay someone else's mortgage or you want to pay your own
Right.
mortgage? You want a forced savings account? Because that's what a house is. It's a forced savings account.
Yeah.
Historically, houses don't depreciate. I mean, not in 1990, I think we took a hiccup like back like -1%, and then obviously 2008, but that was the banking's fault, not housing itself.
Homeowners.
So other than that, like we don't see negative appreciation really ever. And it's the largest investment just about everybody will make in their lifetime. And I think it's a good one.
So with people not really having like that, I think just generally that much of an increase in income, I think usually people get 3 to 5% of an increase in income compared to what they're saying is 40. Does the Portland area, Oregon, any of this have any like programs that help you as far as like special like down payment assistance or anything that are special to those markets that people should be looking into if they're getting kind of close on funds?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's Oregon Bond. I think that only comes up at the beginning of the year every year. And I don't know if they did it last year. You
Okay.
didn't hear too much about it. A lot of news has been covering other things. Um, there's that. And then there's some lenders here locally. I know there's a Fairway Mortgage. They've had programs that assist. And then, it depends which neighborhood you're in, price point. So it really helps to get hooked up with a lender, an agent and a lender that knows where to get that down payment assistance from. I guess, and I hate saying this, but like the hardest thing is it's been really difficult in the Portland market to get those offers accepted right now. because
Yeah.
just the sole sheer amount of cash coming from California into our market.
Well, yeah, and the complexity, and us, when we list a property, we know what goes into a lot of these offers. We know what people are working with, and if you're, Cass, if you're bringing me, 15% over asking in pure cash, and then I have somebody else who maybe really, really wants the house, but they're working on down payment assistance, and they've got, an additional appraisal they need to get done, and all those different types of things, man, it almost seems impossible to make it happen.
It is changing though. So stick with it. It is, I've seen VAs get accepted recently. I saw an FHA get accepted recently. I was an only offer on a house one day.
Nice. Well, thing that it's really frustrated me is I feel like the last year or so, VA has gotten really beat up, and I love VA loans. VA loans are great. Like, people have made jokes. We see memes all the time about VA. It's not subpar. It's not a crappy loan product. They don't pick apart the house. Like, it is not what people are making it out to be. So I hope that that's something we see kind of change culturally, is that we see that agents are educating their sellers on what that loan looks like, what that buyer type is, and things like that. That's one where I kind of have a little bit of a bone to pick with people on, because I think they're great loans.
The only thing on that, and I will say I've done a few sales with VAs, is like, you can't have chipping paint on the house, and your sidewalk cannot have a toe trip. Other than that, like, there's nothing to worry about. Like, VA offers are fantastic. If the house doesn't have either of those things, you should be just fine.
Oh, so I know, like, here, right? We're seeing a lot of of course, again, we talk about Portland being a little more affordable than Seattle, but we're seeing a lot of our buyers that are coming in with just ginormous chunks of equity. So a lot of our buyers I had this house in Seattle when it was 400 grand. Now somehow it's magically 1.3 million, and I haven't done anything. So I'm going to buy something bigger. I think nationally, the last Keeping Current Matters stats I showed was like 30% were cash offers, and like 25% were actually first-time homebuyer type homeowners. So still a quarter of our buyers are coming in as first-time homebuyers. What are the trends like in your area as far as who's buying what?
I would say that we're probably a little higher on the cash side, just because, affordability, and people can just move from California and buy 3 houses. And they do. They buy one big one and 3 little ones. But as for first-time home buyers, I'd say that the stat on that is probably pretty correct. Talking to my clients and my friends and other agents, and just kind of what's out there. Obviously, I haven't seen any stats from the MLS because they aren't that fabulous.
Sure.
But it seems, when I talk to people just kind of feeling it out, everyone's like, oh, they got their first house. They got their first house. They bought sold. Like, I would say that, the 25 is probably not that off in Portland.
I heard a market analyst talking about Portland, and he said when the market cools, the suburbs are going to sneeze and Portland's going to catch the flu. And some statistics with that showed that Portland's actually down like 1.6% year over year. And yet we have places like Lake Oswego, Happy Valley, Hillsborough, and a few others that are well over 20% growth. I just, I don't mean to like criticize the market experts, but when you're down 1%, I don't know that you're going to like die by any means. What are the trends? I mean, I know this guy's obviously pushing a narrative, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I also found out like he's a real estate agent in the suburbs of Portland, so probably likes that anyways, right?
That's probably his neighborhood, and he's probably a little butthurt.
Yeah. Catch that fine print. So you're not seeing that as a trend?
No. Last year, in 2021 as a whole, Portland Metro was up 13.1% in appreciation. And it just depends which neighborhood you're in. North, like this little niche in Northeast Portland, 18.1% up last year. like you were talking about, Lake Oswego also up 18.1%. But who doesn't want to live with all the celebrities
Right.
and all the million, like to get into Lake Oswego? I believe it's like at least 1 or 1.2 to get in there. And if you want on the lake, it's like 4 million.
Holy cow.
But I don't think the 1.6. I'm really curious to see where he found that, because I have not seen that anywhere unless he's talking about like one little pocket of maybe Gresham.
Okay. Perfect.
So everybody's up like ridiculously. I know neighborhoods that in 2 years have seen 58% appreciation.
Wow.
It just depends where you're at, what your house is. Like everybody likes those mid-century moderns right now, so they'll pay a premium for those. I was one of 35 offers on one of those.
Golly.
Was up for 489. Needed 150,000 in work. It was a 3-bed, 2-bath, like 16 or 1,700 square feet, one level. All the mid-mod stuff that you ever wanted.
Sure.
And my client was like, "Oh, I want to write for 530," and I was like, "Mm-mm."
Mm-mm.
And he's like, "Okay, 550." Mm-mm. He's like 575. I'm like, "Mm-mm." He's like 600. I was like, "Oh, you're almost there." And he's like, "What?" So he settled at 575. We were one of, it was all cash. We were one of 35 offers. It went for $160,000 over ask, all cash, no contingencies, close in 10 days.
God, that's wild.
So, I mean, when you look at that from a perspective of 1.6%, like, no.
Right. That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
No.
And I think the media narrative for where we live is very twisted, right? Like let's say if you're in the Midwest and you hear about Seattle or Portland, it's just like blue-haired girls screaming at police officers all day, every day. Like that's it. That's all you
probably
see.
does happen all day.
I imagine it happens. Like this area is not as insane as people think it is. Like
no,
it's just not that far out. Like, I mean, it's different. I'll give you that. But most of us are just like trying to go walk around in mountains and buy cool stuff and live our life. Like,
yeah,
it's just not that narrative. Just I don't think is real.
No,
everything's burning down.
Keep Portland weird is real. I will tell you that. I was driving down the random street corner in a neighborhood, and this guy was in a chicken costume playing a violin. Real.
Makes sense.
Real.
Yep.
I was like, I don't know what's going on. But the everything that happened with the protests and everything, I kept like my friends, I'm from Minneapolis. And so, I didn't stick my nose in on business. When I saw stuff on social media, I asked my friends, what's going on? But then those friends, when the riots and everything were happening in Portland, they're like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, that's not that bad. Mm-hmm. It's like 2 square blocks in front of this one courthouse. I'm like, it moves, but it's not like the whole town is not burning down. If you'd like to come out here and see it, it is not.
We're not in fear for our lives at any point in time.
I'm like,
so speaking of celebrity homes, did you see and now we got a few minutes left, but did you see the release that that Kenny G's former home just hit the market up here in Seattle?
I saw that. That was enormous. And 80 million, what, 80 million was it?
85 million. It's actually the most expensive listing we've ever had in this MLS. And mind you,
first of all, I want to know who's going to buy that. 85 million.
Well, I can't, I'm so skeptical now of these celebrity homes because I look at like Russell Wilson's house that was bought for, 6.7 million a few years ago. And he's trying to get 36 million for the house and the lot next to it. Like, I'm all about some appreciation, but I mean, come on. Now, this one's pretty sick, but I just wonder, I heard they actually built this property on Bainbridge Island and then moved it over to Hunts Point. And they actually wanted to actually build an even bigger, like, mega house, but like local rulings kind of stopped it. And
first of all, can I ask you something?
Sure.
What does someone do with a house that big?
That's what we're talking about in the car today. I don't really know what you do with it. It's 12,000 square feet. There's a pool house and a couple other properties that are like another 5,000 square feet on it. So like the size of my house is this pool house, right? Which blows my mind. It's got like no bank waterfront parking for a 150-foot yacht that like pulls up to the house. Not like at a marina, like right there.
It's got a dock for its own yacht.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a seaplane parking, but like I look at that and I'm like, man, who, like genuinely, who is going to spend and I'm not critiquing the agents that listed it or anything like that, but I just see properties like that and I'm like, I feel like there's like one buyer for that on the whole planet, and it's the guy that already bought it.
Yeah. Well, those houses, they're so buyer specific too. So someone, there's a huge one, and we'll have to do another story about it once I get into it. My client's going to help me get in, but it's this huge house down in Beaver Creek, Oregon, out in the country. And it's like that. It's like 12 or 15,000 square feet or something like that. And like, he was telling me about it, and every room has a theme. And I'm like, who buys, like, who after the owner, who buys this?
They're too customized, man. I mean, I
could paint over the green wall in my coming up listing or the
right.
No big deal. But what do you do with like the safari bedroom?
Yeah. The ultra wealthy are eclectic little creatures. I'll give them that. All right, that's pretty much all the time we've got for today. So thank you guys for commenting on here. So be here next Monday as well, and then Cass will be back with me the Monday after that. I have a guest on here, so pretty excited to pick somebody else's brain about what's going on in the real estate market nationally. Obviously, my number is on the screen, so is Cass. So if you need anything in either one of our areas, just go ahead and give us a call. If you're not in our market, therealaustinrobertson@gmail.com. Shoot me a message. I'll connect you with one of my referral partners and make sure you're squared away. Any last notes, Cass?
No, just thank you so much. This has been really fun. If you couldn't tell, I was being accosted by my dog for about half of it, trying to keep her off the screen. But other than that, if you've got questions about Portland, Salem, Southwest Washington, and why Washington is better than Portland, because there's no, it is because there is no income tax. You can give me a call at the phone number there.
Awesome. All right, you guys have a good day.
All right.
See y'all later.
See ya.